Hello guys, yeah, I'm Yusaku here, and today we're going to be talking about some Yu-Gi-Oh! Vrains episode 20. Now, on the whole, I thought this episode was pretty good, although I will admit I was slightly disappointed about the relatively minimalist information we got. We pretty much got that Dr.Kogami was at the head of this, which was a sort of prediction I think most of us were probably heading towards anyway. It seemed to be the way it was going, with AI somehow being involved and us having already known that he created AI. That seemed to be a fairly logical conclusion. With all that being said, though, I do think it was still a good episode, and the content that we did have in it I think was well executed, and a lot of that had to do with some strong writing. For example, like the way Playmaker closed out the duel. He brought back Angel Hound and Angel Angel, and then goes on to explain to Aoi and Akira how basically they don't belong in the graveyard, they protect each other, and there's something that's really nice about that sibling bond they have, and it was cool to see sort of a reversal of roles there. Akira was the one who's trying to save Playmaker from his own darkness, when it turns out Playmaker is the one who ends up saving them. He tells them, stay out of this, you guys have lives to live, I need to go take care of this is my problem, not yours. So it was kind of funny to watch that turn around, because that was what Akira tried to do to Playmaker. He just turned the tables on him, and it's going to be interesting to see how it plays out. I have a feeling those two are definitely going to come back and help Yusaku at some point. I think it's definite that by the end, the way Aoi kind of just mentions to Akira, he's going to take his own route no matter who talks to him, that both of them have a mutual respect for Playmaker. There's no hard feelings on either end of this disagreement, and I think that's pretty clear. So those two, I think, if Yusaku does end up with a team, which he most likely will, those two I think we can definitely count in as a part of it. Along with finding out some more things, we also found out where Emma probably was during all of this episode, or what her plan was, I should say. See, she had mentioned when she first talked to Aoi stuff about redeeming herself and those types of things, and I think really what Emma's goal was, based on the fact that, once the episode concluded, her words were, you two take care of each other now, to Akira and Aoi. I think her goal was basically just to get those two on good terms with each other again, since both of them seemed to have a bit of a misunderstanding with the other. Akira seemed to be rather distant from Aoi, and the way he was protecting her, almost like kind of that classic superhero mentality that a lot of them take, of, I need to separate myself from my loved ones, that way none of the people who are after me go after them. Sort of like that in its own right, and Aoi felt like he didn't really necessarily care about her as much as he used to, given how he was never around to spend time with her. Now they seem to be a lot closer again, the way this episode ends, given how, Aoi goes in to protect Akira, then he spins her around and protects her again, and just the way they're looking at each other at the end, and Aoi's like, now I know how you actually feel, you've just been wanting to protect me this whole time, you do still really care. So I think that was Emma's end goal, given the way she seems to kind of be smirking. I mean, we can't tell since we can't see her face under the mask, but her eye expression does seem to show that she was smiling, and then she proceeds to leave. So I think we did get a definite slight glimpse of Emma having a softer side, and I think the events of these past few episodes have more or less confirmed she does feel some degree of connection to the Zaizen family, which I think is good for Emma's character to have that, given how otherwise up to this point we've basically seen her be a ruthless, selfish, manipulative person who's constantly seeking to turn everything into a profit for herself. Just to see a bit of a different side to her, I think gives her more depth. Not that I don't like the other personality too, I definitely do, don't get me wrong, but I think it just adds another level to her character. It's going to make her a lot more interesting to watch, because it makes her slightly less predictable. We know that there is another side that exists, and that can influence her decisions other than just the selfish and somewhat greedy side that we've mostly seen up till this point. Now, while we're on the subject of Emma, there's also the fact that she's escaped with basically all the same information Yusaku has. We saw her, right before the duel between him and Akira started, kind of encapsulizing or something some of that data, and we see her at the end driving off on her motorcycle thinking, oh, who am I going to go sell this to for the highest possible profit? And that's a legitimate plot point to take into consideration here, because the fact of the matter is, what she has is extreme dirt on Soul Technologies, which, from what we can understand of this world, is one of the biggest corporations around. So anybody who has that can tear them down. It could go to a major news company and they could make a huge headline out of it, such as the frog dude and the pigeon guy. They could end up paying her for it and get a ton of money, though I doubt they'd trust her again after what happened with the Playmaker scoop. To be fair, though, that wasn't really her fault, but at the same time. And then, so there's news companies. There could be people who don't like Soul. There could be a business rival of theirs who just want the information in order to make their competitor look bad, and then everybody will turn to them. Though, to our knowledge so far, that doesn't necessarily exist yet, it doesn't mean they aren't out there. They may not have just been mentioned up till this point because it hasn't exactly been relevant. I mean, there's all kinds of possibilities of what she could do with that information. Part of me also wonders if maybe she escaped with a piece of it and like totally removed it from the databank so Playmaker didn't get to see it entirely, and then she's got something that she can still sell off to him or use to manipulate him in some way. I mean, when Yusaku was looking through it, he did seem to think that there was definitely a piece missing in the fact that nothing was explained about why the Hanoi project was done in the first place. I don't think it's likely, given how Emma definitely seems to be showing respect towards Playmaker. I don't think she necessarily wants to dupe him a whole ton, especially in the scenario he's currently in. I think there's a part of her that sympathizes with him a little bit. Now, you know, she was thinking to herself, okay, nobody's going to stop him from getting his revenge now, but she seemed relatively calm about it, not upset, not worried. It was kind of like almost a little bit of relief, like she felt he deserved that in some ways. Granted, you could also take that as her just being cold towards the situation as well. Either way is like a valid way of interpreting what she was saying there. So with that being the case, I mean, take it as you will. I don't necessarily think she took part of that data, but it's certainly a possibility to be considered. So that makes for a good headway into our main plot drop of this episode, was that Dr. Kogami is confirmed to have been in charge of the Hanoi project according to Seoul Technologies databank. Now I throw that last part in because from what we've seen of these chess pieces so far, they definitely seem like they're very puppeteering about things. So just because they present it as Kogami having been the one in charge, I don't think by any means necessarily means he was the one at the very top of things. I think that maybe according to the records he would have been, but that doesn't necessarily mean anything. They could have been holding him against his will or any number of other things to force him to do that project. I'm not entirely convinced that Kogami was completely acting on his own will when he was doing this. I have a feeling someone else might have been at the head of it, even if he was acting on his own will. I think there was probably one person who was a step higher from him. And something that also leads me to believe this is when Kitamura's freaking out about the fact that now Playmaker has the data and he's like screaming in his office, then we get a cut to like who appear to be like two secretaries or like computer workers types who are walking through the hallway, and they're basically just saying to each other, hey, you know, what's he freaking out about? And it's like, oh yeah, well, Playmaker got a hold of the stuff from the databank. And so the fact that two workers, I mean, they could be on the same rank as Kitamura, I don't know, but the fact that they're sort of just casually walking through the hall, don't seem to be in an office, I'm beginning to think that they're probably like middle-end workers, if not like some of the big computer people he was yelling at or something along those lines. And the fact that they already know that makes me wonder if the upper echelon of Seoul Technologies, being our chess pieces, doesn't really care that he got a hold of the information, because if you look at the raw data, they aren't exactly the ones to blame, because they spun the information within the data to make it look like it was all not Kitamura, Dr. Kogami's fault. Now, is that necessarily the case? Like I said, I have a lot of doubts, and based on the fact that their employees just seem to kind of know about what happened already and they aren't trying to cover it up or anything like that. I mean, yeah, they don't know about 10 years ago, but they know there's something that was hidden in that data bank that everybody seems curious about, and they don't seem necessarily super concerned, or I think they would have been covering it up a lot more. I think indicates to me that they aren't super concerned, and if their goal was to almost set this up to quiet out without needing to deal with Playmaker directly, in some ways that could be a clever way to do it, because then it just makes it seem like, oh, well, we don't care, you just found out that Dr. Kogami did it, our hands are clean, we'll share that with you openly if that's really what you want to know. Or at least that could be the way they're trying to make it come across, when in reality maybe they were the ones puppeteering it. Now, I know that's a bit overthinking, so make what you will of that theory, but still. Now, this new knowledge that Kogami was at the head of the Hanoi project almost raises more questions, because it's kind of like, why was he doing it? What was he aiming to do by having all those kids in those rooms, if they were all doing the same thing as Yusaku at least, with the helmets dueling against these like computer systems and all those things for so long? What was his aim? Or the other question could be, what was Seoul Technologies' aims if they were indeed puppeteering it, which they may have been. Regardless, it really makes you wonder the motive. Now, thankfully, that seems to be Playmaker's same question, so I'm sure we're going to be getting answers here pretty soon. And with the little preview we got towards the end, it seems like he's going to be confronting Revolver about that, trying to get some answers. But still, I mean, the other thing we do know about Kogami at this point is he was heavily involved in the creation of the Ignis. With all that being the case, it really makes me wonder if there's some sort of a connection there. You know, was he trying to give the dueling abilities he picked up from the kids after putting them through essentially what could be seen as a incredibly rigorous and dangerous like forcive training program, basically survive or die type of training program for them, and take those best dueling skills and implant them into a program. Maybe that's what he was doing with the Ignis. Maybe he was just trying to harness their dual power, similar to what like Professor Viper had done in GX during Season 3. It's really hard to say at this point, but I'm going to be incredibly curious to find out, and I hope that we start to get some of that soon, because I feel like, as I said in the beginning of this review, these past 3 episodes, they kind of kept teasing, oh, you're going to find a lot out, you're going to find a lot out, you're going to find a lot out, oh, here's this little crumb of knowledge about Kogami, and that's it. Like I said, Playmaker seems to be pursuing this, so hopefully we're getting that soon. Before moving on from Dr. Kogami, we do get a brief scene with him and Revolver towards the very end of the episode, where this like cube type of an object is dropped down this deep hole within linked Vrains, and then they're talking about how that's going to basically spark new battles, and there's a huge power within it, and somehow the whole network's going to get taken down. What is he aiming to do? I mean, I know he was hunting the Ignis. Maybe he figures, you know, he shuts down the Cyverse. Somehow that's tied to the Ignis and it wipes him out. I don't know exactly what his thinking is, but I think it's a good talking point. You know, where's he going with this? What's his overall objective? Regardless, he seems definitely bent on destroying the network. Maybe the network was something he did 10 years ago, and maybe he feels like he really screwed up when he created it, and in his own twisted way, he feels like he's trying to take justice for the actions that he created, the evil he created. Maybe he thinks there's something really dark behind Vrains. Maybe Soul is doing something terrible behind Vrains, and only he knows about it because he was working for them at the time. A really weird note that Yusaku and Kusanagi found when they were looking into the data that they got was he died, and all the other people who were working at the time from Soul Technologies and were like higher up at least seem to have retired after that. Something seems very, very suspicious there. It's like they really, really don't want the public to know anything about this, because the retirement means they would have went into quiet. It's almost like Soul Technologies could have paid them off. Maybe the chess pieces paid off the people involved in this project if the chess pieces were in charge of it, and basically said, hey, look, listen, here's a nice settlement check. Go hide away in the forest and never talk to anybody again. None of this ever happened, okay? Oh, you want us to talk? Okay, let me add a couple more zeros to this check. And then basically those people were silent and nothing ever gets said about this incident. And maybe Kogami refused to play along with their little thing and was on the run for them for 3 years, and that's why 7 years ago, on our current, as opposed to our current time, he was found dead, and that's why he only exists within Vrains now, because he wouldn't play along with their game. He thought what they were doing was evil, and now he's going to extremes in order to shut them down, given how they seem extremely concerned about the status of the Cyverse the few times we've seen them talk. So it's clear that that's important to them. So if this new thing he's working on with Revolver will shut down the Cyverse, maybe it's a way to get to them because they did something terrible. Now, that's a sort of crazy theory without a lot to go off of, but I'm really not entirely convinced that Kogami's entirely evil. I think that his endgame might be something good, and maybe he's taking the wrong path to get there, or something along those lines. Sort of a little bit similar to what Zone was going for in 5Ds, how he was going to try and save the world, but the way he was going about it was all wrong, and that's why Yusei had to correct him. Maybe that's what's going to happen with Yusaku here. It's hard to say. This then brings us a little bit into what we got for the episode preview for next episode after the ending of this one. And there's a line, it's Kusanagi who's narrating this, and there's a line he says that, was the light of hope thrown into the abyss or dark destruction heading towards demise? I'm wondering if he's referencing that cube, at which rate it definitely seems like they're trying to spark interest. Now, that makes me wonder if Playmaker, when he confronts Revolver, which we see him also doing in the preview for next episode, if he's going to find himself, like, beginning to question where he stands on the whole thing. I'm really beginning to think that this time when Playmaker and Revolver converse, this is when they're going to start to find some grounds that maybe they can agree on. That, you know, definite line that existed between them, making them enemies, might start to blur a little bit. Because everything we've gotten so far seems to imply that Revolver is the rival. Consistent theme in Yu-Gi-Oh! Is the revival and the hero clash a lot initially, but the further you get into the show, the more they find themselves working together and, relying on their consistencies and agreements with each other rather than the things that separate them. Look at Kite and Yuma back in Zexal. They absolutely despised each other at first because Kite was basically forced to go against Yuma since they both had the same game, and if Kite failed, his brother was in all kinds of danger, and Yuma had to hunt after the numbers in order to help Astral. But what they found is, over time, by working together, they could overcome both of their problems together. Maybe that's going to be the same thing that happens with Yusaku and Revolver here, and I think this next meeting between them, given how, while we didn't get a lot between them, it did seem like Revolver was fairly calm while speaking to Yusaku in that little tiny glimpse we got. I'm wondering if this is going to be a lot more talking and a lot less dueling, and it's going to show that these two might have the same endgame, or a similar enough endgame that they can work together from time to time. I think it's going to be crucial, these next couple episodes between them, regardless of what happens. And that brings us to another thing that we got in the preview, which if you don't want any spoilers from those little tiny episode summaries we get, click off this video right now, because I'm going to talk real briefly about that. Alright, 3, 2, 1. Here we go. So basically we have Robopi and AI talking briefly in this, and they seem to be talking to each other and kind of making some funny faces and stuff. Robopi seems to, I believe her eyes were turning into hearts and those types of things. We know that AI's been sort of flirting with her, for lack of a better word, as best as he can as an AI to a robot, and those types of things. And we also know from our little episode previews for episode 21, it said that AI and Robopi start to plan something. Now, that could be any number of things. At first, I was really beginning to wonder, when we were further out, if it was going to be something diabolical. Given the way that AI has been acting around Yusaku lately, I think it's very clear that he really cares about their relationship. He seems to really consider Yusaku a friend. He got all excited when they agreed on something in this episode. He was joking around with Akira, saying, we just wanted to show off before we go down. And that's kind of the way that, you have two main protagonists who are in a tough situation kind of joking with each other. It seems almost like the type of humor that they would throw into a Guardians of the Galaxy movie or something like that. It's one of those lines that maybe Star-Lord would throw around as a distraction or something along those lines. And then he's talking about other things, just like his acting jokes, and there's a little bit of banter between Yusaku and him there. And when he got super excited because Yusaku called him by his name towards the end of this episode, and was equally as excited when Yusaku told him to eat as much as he wanted of that data and everything else. And then he was even more overjoyed when Kusanagi complimented him on the job he did. So with all that being the case, I really don't think AI is going to turn against Yusaku here. I'm really beginning to think if it's going to be another comedy aspect, maybe he proposes to Robopi, given the expression that she had lighting up on her face in that episode. That would kind of make sense, or something along those lines, or maybe they're plotting a little party for Yusaku, or just something that's sort of silly. I don't know if that's the best word, but more jokey type. I really don't think it's anything diabolical. If it is, though, then that would be a huge twist, and we find out that Ignis is a total, sociopath AI, that he's completely able to shift his personality at the drop of a dime without any hints of anything else given. The personality we've seen him so far is very funny, very much humorous, doesn't seem to have a super negative intention about him towards anybody. There's nothing about him that seems evil. Sometimes he's snarky, for sure, but evil I definitely wouldn't go that far. And that's going to about wrap up my thoughts on this episode. Be sure to let me know all of your thoughts, comments, theories, etc. in the comment section down below. If you enjoyed this video, also be sure to like and subscribe. If not, constructive criticism is always welcome. And as always, have an excellent day.
I'm chasing cars and driving far, 'cause that's where they told me I needed to go. I never understood where I was heading, but they told me to drive anyway.